Hi, this is Dan Whitney with the Whitney Law Firm in Towson, Maryland. Today we're going to talk about the issue of landlord responsibility for bed bugs in Baltimore City. So I've been a lawyer for about 10 years. I've handled many bed bug cases, and we've sued many landlords and hotel companies in Baltimore City. We've recovered almost $14 million for our clients in a variety of bed bug cases. So a big question with tenants when a landlord or when a bed bug infestation comes up, they want to know who is responsible for the bed bug infestation. It's a big question. So the way it works in Maryland, there's something called the Maryland Minimum Livability Code, which sets a minimum standard that all cities and or counties have to comply with, or at least have a substantial similarity to that statewide code. So today we're going to talk about the responsibility for bed bugs that landlords have in the city. So in Baltimore, you refer to the Baltimore City Building, Fire, and Related Code, which adopts the International Property Maintenance Code 2018. So the International Property Maintenance Code is a set of standards that comes out every few years, and it sets forth essentially standard guidelines that different cities and towns and states adopt, because it's basically a set of rules that's been created so you can adopt it with modifications, and so that's what Baltimore City has done. So regarding bed bugs, per the Maryland Livability Code, in Baltimore City, landlords are responsible for making sure there's no bed bug infestations at the time the tenant moves in. So what does that mean? It means apartments need to be free of bed bug infestation at the time a tenant moves in. Now, how does a landlord make sure that the apartment has no bed bugs before they move someone in? Well, if there's been reports of bed bugs, they need to have the apartment inspected by a trained, licensed pest control professional to be sure that if there was a problem, now the problem is gone. However, many of them, if a tenant complains, they'll just kick that tenant out and put a new tenant, an unsuspecting tenant in who doesn't know they're about to be bitten by bed bugs. So that's for moving in. Now, what about when a bed bug infestation is reported thereafter? So, in Baltimore City, there's a differentiation between a single unit building and a multi-unit building. So say just a row house versus an apartment building. So in a single unit building, the Baltimore Code says an occupant of a single unit building is responsible for extermination of insects other than wood destroying insects. So in other words, the occupant is responsible for extermination. So they're saying if you live in a house by yourself and it's not an apartment complex, tenant, you are responsible. Now, the question is, what does responsible mean? Does that mean you're responsible for paying for it? Does it mean you're responsible for scheduling it? The code doesn't specify, but landlords will say if it's a single unit building, the tenant has to pay. That's what they usually say. Now, in Baltimore, it's different if you're in a multi-unit building or an apartment building. In that case, the code says an occupant of a multi-unit building is responsible for extermination if the occupant's unit is the only one affected. So what does that mean? That just means if you are in an apartment building and you're the only person with the problem, you are responsible. However, practically speaking, based on all my experience doing these cases and having reviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of pest control records, when a tenant in an apartment has a bedbug infestation, they're almost never the only person dealing with it. Usually, at least one of the neighbors also has the infestation, and if the bedbug infestation has spread into the walls between units, of course, the tenant cannot get into that wall that is shared with somebody else, and arguably that wall is not their apartment. Now it becomes a shared problem affecting whoever is on the other side of that wall. So I hope this has been helpful regarding landlord responsibility for bed bugs in Baltimore City. If you have any questions or have a bed bug infestation problem, call us. me, Dan Whitney, the Whitney Law Firm in Towson. We handle many bed bug cases in Maryland and in the city, and we offer free consultations. So if this has been helpful, please leave a thumbs up. If you'd like to see a video on any other content regarding bed bugs, just please leave a comment about that, and I'll make the video if I can. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.